Welcome to Two Hypnotherapists Talking with me, Denise Billen-Mejia, in Delaware, USA.
And me, Martin Furber, in Preston, UK.
This weekly podcast is for anyone and everyone who'd like to know more about the fascinating subject of hypnosis and the benefits it offers.
I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist.
I'm a retired medical doctor turned consulting hypnotist.
We are Two Hypnotherapists Talking.
So let's get on with the episode. Hi, Martin. How are you today?
Denise. I'm good. How are things over there?
They're very nice, bit hot, but it's the end of August, so it's okay.
Yeah, we're at the dregs end of summer over here with a bank holiday weekend on its way, so that usually guarantees rain.
Okay, you could use it for looking at the reports on what's happening with the Thames.
Yeah, well, we're okay in the north actually. We've not been too bad at all weather-wise, rain-wise. You know, our reservoirs are full. They're talking about pumping it all down south.
We'll need it. Good. Okay. Well, that unfortunately cannot be handled by hypnosis. There are some physical things that we don't have control over. But,
No.
but let's have a chat about hypnosis.
Yeah, the myths. That's what we said we'd talk about today.
Yeah.
What are the most common myths that we hear that we can help dispel for some of our listeners?
You can get there's the really dramatic one. There's that picture that people have in their head that's probably from Mesmer himself, you know, the Victorian cape, and really pre-Victorian, wasn't he? The cape around his shoulders and the swinging pocket watches and the very theatrical thing. I think a lot of people still see hypnotists that way, and unfortunately it's still portrayed that way often in movies.
Was it Mesmer?
My mental picture is
was it Mesmer who started the thing with the pocket watch?
I don't know. It was metal, wasn't it? He used magnets. That was the first thing. They thought magnets would help, and of course, you know, down the road we're using magnets for things, but
yeah, of course, the expression animal magnetism, wasn't it? Animal magnetism.
He realized he didn't need the magnets himself. It was his authoritarian approach to suggestion that was doing it. But so he was actually a pretty good hypnotist. It was still an evolving art to what we know today. And I do think that there are a few people who do sort of magic hypnosis, incorporate some hypnosis in their stage magic or stage hypnotists who still prolong that vision of a very theatrical person. But it's beginning to go, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so like, what are the myths then? People think mind control. That's the first one they think, isn't it? Yeah. Right.
Mind control, or it's magic, or it's, you know, the dark arts, which of course it is not.
No,
not at all dark.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, no specific ones mentioned, but some religions frown upon hypnosis because of its image of being a dark art or being something, you know, out of this world or not of this world.
Yeah, although I would point out, actually, it's not really religion, it's the sect, some individual sects within religions. The Catholic Church accepted it back in the 1800s.
Oh, really?
And that's about as conservative a group as you can usually find. So I think that it's probably individuals who have founded their own particular small group that have that feeling about it. I mean, obviously there are some people whose practice of hypnosis can be a little bit overbearing. I think it may have, there are some people who are particularly susceptible to being drawn into, I mean, really religion in itself is it incorporates hypnosis, right? When you're praying, you're concentrating on something. So
the long-term effects of indoctrination.
Yeah, exactly. but that's it. It's not brainwashing, but yes, there's some overlaps with a lot of these things. But when people are looking at what it actually does, it's not, you can't walk into somebody's office and have them snap their fingers and have you go straight under. You can if you've got a really good pre-talk, but it's not the first moment you've spoken to that client. And they perpetuate that this is, of course, I've never met this person before in my life. Yes, you have. Or they've been to somebody else and they're already, you know, you said yourself, you have a little story about having seen somebody and then mentioning something else to them. You want to tell our listeners about that? You don't have to go into the whys, but just explain how it worked.
Yeah, it was a few years ago now when I was entering my hypnosis journey, as it were. I went to see somebody, and I had a hypnotherapy session with them, and then I told them about something else, and they just said to me, well, you already know how to go back into trance, do that now. And I was straight there, and they did the work they needed to do, and it worked really well, I must say. But then I am, as with anything, if you're a willing participant, if you are, I don't like to, I mean, what's the word, suggestible, even that in itself could have connotations. I think if you're a willing participant and if you have faith in the process, that's the thing.
See, I like the word suggest. I agree. It does sound pejorative to say that somebody's highly suggestible, but it just means that those people have really good imaginations and are able to enter into the process. What I like about the word suggestion is that you can reject it. It's just a suggestion. I actually wanted that to be the name of my website, but I was persuaded by other people that wasn't a good idea. I thought, just a suggestion.com. Because that's all it is. You are giving back to your client what they want already and what they've already told you they want already.
Yeah, and they're absorbing it in such a way from ourselves as a third party. They're absorbing it in such a way as to act upon it or to accept it, to, I don't know, how would you describe it?
No, it does. It becomes part of their automatic responses to whatever the trigger is.
Yeah.
What other objections do you get from, they're not really objections, because obviously by the time somebody has made a phone call to you to set up an appointment and come to the appointment, whether it's on Zoom or in person, they're already part of the way into accepting the ideas. But what kinds of things do they report being told by their friends and family when they say that they're going to a hypnotist?
One question I've been asked a few times is to do with, will they be in a trance state and reveal their innermost secrets and this kind of thing? You know, obviously, no, you won't. No, you won't reveal anything to me that you don't want to reveal. Again, I think that's perpetuated by what people see on movies and that kind of thing. If people could be readily hypnotized and spill out all their innermost secrets, the police would have been doing it years ago, surely. You know, and again, if people could be hypnotized against their will and spill out their innermost secrets, surely the police would use that as a method of questioning. You
would think so. Now, of course, they do. They have what's now known as the cognitive interview, which is with the cooperation of a witness, getting information from people that they are resisting telling you about because they don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly to do with just triggering memory, isn't it? It's like when an eyewitness to a situation comes forward, for example, and they may have seen, let's say, somebody being mugged on the street, and you know they saw it, but they can't remember too much detail. With a careful line of questioning, with a sort of certain type of set and style of questions, they can get more information out of this person without leading them on and suggesting either. But it can help them to visualize that situation better and more clearly and remember.
But that's exactly the same thing that happens when you go to take an exam. You know all the material, you walk in, you sit down, they hit the start now, and your mind goes blank.
Yeah.
If you can relax in that situation, all the information which is already in your brain will come out. Now, of course, there is the fact that memory of events, when you take them out and look at them and put them back, there's always a little bit of a change.
There's always a little tweak, isn't there?
The little tweaking every time. So it is, hypnosis was used quite a lot for a very brief period of time, and then we realized that there were some false memories coming forward. The little tweaks were getting in the way of things. So it's now known as the cognitive interview, and there's a lot of rules and restrictions around it, which is fine. That's not the work that you and I do, however. So if a client comes to me, it's usually they're worried that I think actually one of the things that I tell them that they're surprised by, I don't know if this really qualifies as a myth, but they don't realize that once they've been hypnotized a few times and I've talked to them, I'll be able to do what you did with that person who said, you know how to get yourself into trance, and you can just take yourself to that place. Now, you won't have my voice in your head if it's, you know, suddenly decided you want to do something. But you can record your own suggestions and play them back to yourself. There's a, you know, you just need to learn to relax, because it is a natural phenomenon that you're going to do it anyway. You just don't necessarily realize it or be using it effectively, as effectively as it might be.
Yeah, you need to learn how to do it on command, as it were, to order.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it really is just getting yourself in the zone. You know, which, of course, a lot of us work with people who have performance anxiety of various kinds. Things like public speaking, doing Zoom interviews, going on TV, those things where you need to be able to be calm. Otherwise, you freeze up.
It's funny, isn't it, how we all have our sort of reservations on things. Mine is speaking one-to-one on camera. I just fall apart every time, guaranteed. Speaking with you, no problem at all. Public speaking,
because we have so much practice.
Yeah, true. But public speaking, standing up on stage in front of 500 strangers, no issue whatsoever for me.
Really? That's
really none whatsoever. And I really like helping other people being able to achieve that as well. But my one thing is speaking one-on-one into camera. No, absolutely no. I'm just too self-conscious all the time. I think it's because you're just looking back at yourself. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I don't have any trouble talking. Well, obviously, now and again, I get nervous about things, but talking one-on-one is fine. Recording my own scripts and trying to record things straight, and I find very difficult. Talking into a void, I have a real difficulty with that. I'm not sure there's hypnosis for that. We'll see. Maybe you should hypnotize me. I'll report back some other day.
You can give me marks out of 10. Right, let's get back on topic. Myths. Right, okay. Mind control is the main one people are worried about. You know, again, it's from the movies, though, isn't it? You know,
right. Or the idea that they won't be able to come out of hypnosis.
Yeah, I mean,
get stuck.
Yeah, I mean, what was that urban myth that went around a few years ago, that somebody was being hypnotized and their hypnotist had a heart attack and died or something midway, and they were stuck in a trance?
It was a movie. It was in one of the movies.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing doesn't do anything to help us, does it?
No, it doesn't. Except, you know, people talk about hypnosis, which is maybe nice now and again, because it does tend to come in waves. It's very fashionable. Currently, I think the only thing that you hear significant positive comments about hypnosis is with childbirth.
Hypnobirthing.
And people don't think using hypnosis in childbirth is. I've never heard anybody say anything negative about it.
Really?
Yeah.
And so is that used in place of things like gas and air, or is it used in addition to?
It's usually, like with most anesthetics, it's used, and the other is available if you need it. You know, it's just to help you be calm about it, be able to visualize the, again, natural process. But if something goes wrong, you want the anesthetist around.
Oh yeah,
in case they need to do something in a hurry, and we don't have time to spend. You know, there's two people when it's an obstetrics case. You know, at least two people. Sometimes there's 3 or 4.
You know, it's quite a strange one for me, that, Denise. As a male, I have no idea what childbirth must be like, other than the fact, you know, it's incredibly painful. But I've no. No.
Do not perpetuate this myth. For many people, we don't use the word painful because it's a suggestion, right? So we say uncomfortable, discomfort. Yes, it is an extreme form of discomfort on occasion, but it is also, for most people, a joyful thing. And a lot of the pain that people feel is the pain they've associated in their minds because of terrible cowboy movies where somebody's writhing around on a bed, hanging onto the bedpost, screaming. Yes, it can be, but if you can give a woman a sense of comfort, to know what's going on, to educate people so they know what's happening, it can really be a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's raised the question with me. Presumably, when you're in childbirth, your adrenaline level is going to be through the roof to get you through it, because there's an awful lot of effort and energy involved in it. So your body will, generate the adrenaline to give you the strength to do it, and which would also presumably dull the discomfort. But adrenaline, relaxation, two opposites sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, but we also know it's not just relaxation. The hypnosis is, yes, relaxation, but it's because you have focused concentration. And that is what you need when the only thing that you really worry about when you're giving birth is the baby.
Yeah.
Frankly, yes, I'd like to be comfortable too, but most women in childbirth are concerned about the health of the baby.
Right. So getting back to myths again, we're going to get onto childbirth. Myths. Okay. So yeah, the myths are here. Will I get stuck in hypnosis? No, we've dispelled that one. We can absolutely make that clear. You will not get stuck in hypnosis.
No, naturally, you'll either come out of it anyway, or you'll fall asleep and then come out of that, because every time you fall asleep, you've gone through that little brainwave pattern that is hypnosis.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I always describe hypnosis to people, because it means different things to different people. But when people ask me for my description of it, when clients ask for my description of it, I say it's that little point where you're just half awake, half asleep, because none of us remember falling asleep that actual moment, do we?
No, of course not.
It's
also that as you're waking, am I awake yet? I don't know. Maybe I am. Where am I? What day is it?
yeah. So I never wake up in a good mood, do you?
Usually, not always, but usually. Depends on if I was woken by something, maybe not. Especially if you get interrupted in a good dream. That's very annoying.
Yeah, that's one thing I hate. That if something disturbs me in the middle of a really good dream, it's like you want to get back into it.
And you can. You can tell yourself to do that.
Yeah.
It's another good technique. When you learn hypnosis, you'll be able to do that.
Actually, that's another thing that just reminds me of another time with the client, actually, when I'm bringing them back out of trance, and they were like, "I didn't want to come back out. I was enjoying that." Do you get that?
That's me.
Yeah. Do you get that?
I when we were doing back and forth practicing, learning. So I was being hypnotized several times a day by other people who were learning hypnosis, and I do not remember the conversation, which is another myth that we need to talk about. But I hear 3, and you're coming back into the room, and I hear in my head saying, "No."
Oh, it's not just me then.
Because it is such a comfortable place. It's such a nice place to be. But that does remind me of the other one. That is, oh, I wasn't hypnotized. I remember everything you said. And that is really big. It does depend entirely on the client and their, for lack of a better word, their personality, their learning style, the amount of trust they can have to it. And it doesn't matter whether you remember, whether you're somebody who does remember everything, or whether you're someone who doesn't remember a thing after they start the process. That does not affect the effectiveness of the hypnotic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is part of what we were taught. The depth of trance is not actually important. It's the amount of concentration on.
Well, with the exception, I think, of things like anesthesia. If I was being hypnotized, I wouldn't want to be aware of what was going on.
But I had somebody saying to me one time, I can remember everything. I don't feel like I was hypnotized. And I said, okay, how long do you think that lasted? They said, oh, only about 5 or 10 minutes. Exactly 45 minutes. So, you do lose track of time when you're hypnotized, I find. And, as soon as I pointed that out to the client, they realized, oh, yeah, well, they must have been out for quite a big part of it.
Yeah, I think there were a few sessions with fellow students where I can remember. I remember I was aware that something had happened. They would sort of come and go. They probably were fractionating. Sorry, using technical terms. They were probably bringing me up slightly in order to allow me to go into a deeper state, which we call fractionation. And that was those are probably the bits I remember. Which I don't really remember now, but yeah. So what others are the big mythical? I think it's so much of it is from the movies. It's sort of give you a code word and will reactivate you 20 years from now we'll say Rosebud and you'll do bizarre or Manchurian Candidate, kind of that sort of thing. You'll get a phone call,
or it was
then you'll go off and...
Dynasty, the reunion, when Crystal was going, I must kill Blake. That was a...
Oh, I don't remember that one. Okay.
Yeah, so that,
but
yeah,
yes, let's
dispel that myth.
Sort of thing.
Let's dispel that myth immediately. No.
Well, there's two parts to that myth. One is that you could be told to do anything that would be contravene your own moral code, which you wouldn't do. But also, whenever you're going to be hypnotized, you need to be cooperating.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even if it's using an anchor, a trigger that we've given a client, if you ask them to hold their finger and thumb together to push them together in order to, because it's been connected under hypnosis with a particular memory or sensation or emotion, they've still got to be cooperating to do that first step.
No, so I mean, I always say people have got to have faith in the process for it to work. You know, if they don't enter into it wholeheartedly, then, you know, there's a chance it won't work. That's if, for example, somebody comes to me for giving up smoking and they say to me, you know, their wife sent them, they don't really want to do it. Well, it's not going to work, is it? It's not going to work. Yeah.
I always, my heart sinks a little bit when I'm calling about my son. Just son to call. I mean, obviously, if this is a child, I need to speak to the parent first.
Yeah.
But the client is the child, or it's more often a late adolescence, early college age. But the person who is the person in the chair that you're talking to is being hypnotized, and you need to have them completely on board. It helps if the parents are too, and their friends are too, but it's essential that they trust you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you just raised, and it's because, of course, we are, for our listeners' benefit, we are on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. Children and hypnosis, that's okay in the USA. That's allowed, is it? Yeah.
Well, for a start, until you're about 8 or 9, you're just walking hypnotized beings. Children are if they trust you and you say something to them, they'll believe it, they'll take it on board. Because they haven't built up that sort of defense critical mind. But yes, it is. Now, do I think it's ethical for somebody who hasn't worked with children and been trained to do so, or have a psychology background? No, I think that with everything we do, you need to be thoroughly trained in that aspect.
Absolutely.
So even though you're now, I can't remember the initials you use. So what you got wrong with your business card?
CNHC. Thank you for that.
For those people on this side of the Atlantic, would you like to say what that is?
Complementary and Natural Healthcare Council. Right.
Now, which is the one that the physicians would be looking at in GPs or prism? That's the one that they would look at.
You're on that approved registry. It means you meet certain standards, and also you are held to account on everything you do. They check up on everything in terms of maintaining professional development, one thing and another.
But the standard physicians who are in general practice in the UK would look at that list to make sure somebody was adequately trained, and that's the list they would look at. CNHC register. Do they not refer children to hypnotists, or do they send them to psychologists who also do hypnosis?
I think I've never had one referred to me by a GP. What their procedure is, I'm not sure. Excuse me, I have an enhanced DBS clearance to work with children and vulnerable adults, so I can work with children of any age, although I don't work with anybody under 16.
No acronyms, please.
Oh,
you have what?
It's I don't know what DBS stands for, actually. It's the actual breakdown.
We'll put it in the show notes.
It means I've had the police clearance to work with children and vulnerable adults. They go into all your background and make sure you've got no criminal record, make sure the police aren't holding any other information on you, like you're part of some mafia family or something like that, the other kind of records that they hold. So you get an enhanced clearance. to work with children and vulnerable adults. It means
Right.
I can go into schools and do talks with children, that
Right.
kind of thing.
But that just means that you are a safe,
Yeah.
non-abusive person. It doesn't mean you've been trained to look after children.
Correct. Yeah.
It just means you're permitted to be within.
Yeah.
Okay. So with the school that you trained with, do they offer training for children, or do they actually discourage
one of the extra CPDs you can do in due course is specifically about working with children. As I say, as you pointed out quite rightly, I haven't had specific training for working with children, just the general training. So for that reason and for other reasons, I don't see anybody under 16 years of age anyway. That's out of my choice. I agree with you. I think people should have specific training for young children. You know, for example, for me, I wouldn't like the thought of hypnotizing, say, an 8-year-old and them having some kind of abreaction or something, or you know, I'm not used to handling children. You know, it is very specific working with children. You know that as a pediatrician.
Right. So that you just used a word that I'm not sure this really follows from the myth, but perhaps it does, because there have been large groups of people who've been at shows, particularly for some reason universities and colleges bring in hypnotists to do, you know, during Freshers Week. Let's all have a laugh at somebody who thinks their sneaker is a telephone, and which yeah, fine, you're laughing, it's okay, but it's just another way of disrespecting something very serious. But you can have a problem with that because you're one person on a stage. There might be 5,000 people in the room, or you know, a couple of hundred, but far more than you can physically put your hand on to watch that person. And anybody who's hypnotizing somebody is watching for them. Not that anything actually bad is happening to them, but if they have a strong emotional response under hypnosis, that's usually when you say an abreaction, that's what it is. Somebody may suddenly burst into tears, or suddenly get up and start pacing around the room. If you get one person doing that in a large crowd, it's probably okay, but the person next to them may start doing it too, and soon you've got a form of hypnosis, not caused by the hypnotist, but a form of hypnosis with peer reaction. Mass hysteria. And there's another word that's highly pejorative. It's an actual thing that people aren't, you know, it's unfortunately named after the uterus, and it's got nothing to do with the uterus, but but it's an unpleasant experience for the person going through it. And if you're on one-to-one with somebody and that happens to them, you can bring them out of it. You can do other things to help them calm down. But if you've got a room full of people, you can't. And that's unfortunate. Those are the things that get reported in the paper or on TV shows if they're filming it. And it gives the impression that it's dangerous and it's unpleasant. So it's certainly not pleasant for somebody to have a reaction, depending on what memory is being triggered when they burst into tears. I mean, sometimes it's joy, actually. I mean, a lot of people crying while they're talking to me, but they're not unhappy. They're just, sometimes happiness comes out in tears too.
Well, absolutely it does. Yeah, I mean, that's something as well. If we talk about, because we'll talk about myths, one thing or another. Abreactions, a bad reaction or an emotional reaction while under hypnosis. I think, again, a lot of those are associated with the woo-woo kind of hypnosis where people are taken back to imagine they were, you know, I don't know, Anne of Cleves in a previous life or something or whatever. You know, people are using
I certainly don't advertise.
I certainly don't
life regression. But then again, somebody may, most of us think that it's a form of analogy. Right?
Yeah.
So people might process something historical and incorporate it into their own memories. And this is the problem with memory. It's a weird thing. It does its own thing most of the time. And so that might come out in a session when you're talking to somebody. I don't do a lot of hypnosis that requires the client to speak to me during hypnosis, but if they start to talk to me, I let them. But I certainly would not, you know, if somebody were to come to me and say, I'm just wondering if I was Anne of Cleves in a previous life. And that's often when people are saying it can't be true. One, I don't believe in reincarnation, but that's me. But nobody ever remembers, being a caveman, or it's always a very specific thing. It's usually a historical figure. It's something they must have read about, and it's nothing obscure ever.
No, that's it. It's something or someone that they have come across at some point in time. It's in their memory from somewhere.
Right. And that may be valuable to them to help them process something. But in and of itself, even if you are being recycled, this is the life you're living now, and we're helping you live this life.
Yeah. So myths, like more myths, let me think now.
Well, it's a new myth, I guess. You can't be hypnotized over the internet. I get quite a lot of people saying, oh, you do it online, it can be done online. Yes, it can.
It can work better online.
Yeah, I think so.
If clients are wearing headphones, particularly, because they already cut down the sensory input by closing their eyes, and then you've actually got more concentration from them wearing headphones because there's no other distraction going into the ears. That's what I find. Yeah, definitely. I can put that down as a definite myth. You can definitely be hypnotized over the internet.
Right.
Let's summarize the myths first of all, Denise, before we call today.
1, you will be hypnotized by somebody against your will. No. You can get stuck in hypnosis and you can't get out because your hypnotist had a heart attack, just like I think it was Brendan Fraser movie. So that doesn't happen. Somebody will one day whisper a code word to you that you were given by an evil hypnotist, and you will go off and do something terrible. No. What else? Oh yes, you have to not be able to remember. You can't remember anything that's said to you. This is also not true.
No,
most people do remember everything.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but most people do.
But of course, it's not what you remember that does the work. It's what you consciously remember that does the work. It's what's going on in your subconscious brain.
Right. Your subconscious picks up everything. Yeah. And decides whether or not it's keeping it.
All right, then. So that's the myths. That's what it can't do. Let's just, before we call it a day for today, let's just talk about what it can do very, very briefly.
It can help you to relax. It can help you get to sleep easier because it will calm those crazy little things that are buzzing around in your head. It can help with discomfort or chronic pain. It can help with immunological responses. It's used effectively for autoimmune diseases. It can help with, for example, it's the primary suggestion. It's the primary thing that's offered in the UK to a patient who has irritable bowel syndrome because it is so effective. It doesn't mean they have to have it if they don't want it, but it's something that's offered to them. It's in the NICE guidelines. That's the first thing. The NICE guidelines for Americans is the standard of care that the government has decided to put for everybody who's being treated under the national health system.
So our NICE guidelines, I think in the UK, they recommend it as a first thing for IBS, but they won't pay for it.
Oh, they won't?
No,
that's
the
interesting.
NHS won't pay for hypnotherapy, although they recommend it. You can go onto the NHS website and look at various treatments, and they talk about hypnotherapy for various things, including IBS, but they won't fund it.
Even if a physician is performing it? Because that's the issue here. You can't go to somebody who is not a psychologist or a physician and be hypnotized for anything, no matter what it is, that the insurance company's not going to pick it up. But that may change.
No, as far as I'm aware, in the UK, the NHS still won't fund it. Some private health insurers will now fund hypnotherapy to varying degrees, whether they'll fund 1 or 2 sessions or something like that. There's various health insurance companies over here from the small funds that pay for occasional treatment to the ones that cover you for, you know, absolutely every ailment you ever have.
That's
depending
because
on
you
your
have to
policy.
pay a fortune to be insured by them.
Fortunes.
Yeah.
So getting back to the question was, what can it, you know, what can hypnotherapy work for? I tend to summarize it by saying anything that's stress related, it helps with, including the physical things, because stress causes inflammation. It's one of those things, isn't it? It can cause inflammation. So, you know, you're the doctor. Things that are caused by inflammation.
And stress isn't always negative. I mean,
we need a certain amount.
Stress isn't necessarily a good idea, but it's not necessarily caused by a horrible thing. No. Getting married or moving house can be incredibly stressful.
Oh, absolutely. We need a certain amount of stress to motivate us, don't we?
Yeah.
To get us going in the morning. We need a certain amount of stress. It's when we have too much.
First law of kinetics.
Yeah. It's when we have too much stress or we can't cope with stress. I mean, some people cope better with stress than others, don't they?
Of course, but it bothers me a little bit that people feel they have to cope without help. If you're feeling particularly stressed, you know, you should be able to go and talk to somebody about it. It doesn't necessarily mean a hypnotist, but if a friend, and a lot of those conversations will have some aspects of hypnosis attached to them, because it's allowing you to take your mind off of those things. You're having a conversation, you're concentrating on that conversation.
Yeah, and the whole point of the conversation is that you want to feel better. So you're talking to somebody with the preconceived idea that I'm going to feel better at the end of this conversation. I will be feeling better than I do now by the end of this conversation. So, you know, it's a positive conversation.
By those standards, having a cup of tea.
Yeah.
That's the first thing an English person says. You're having a happy thing happening, have a cup of tea. Bad thing happening, have a cup of tea. Walk in the house, have a cup of tea. But there is just, it gives you a moment. It's part of the ritual. You know, there's all of those things help us to center ourselves, to be a little more grounded and therefore cope with the stresses of life. And some of the stresses are pretty boring and mundane, but they still add up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny you're talking about rituals though, because that is something, isn't it? That's almost hypnotic in effect when you look at the ritual of, let's say, the Japanese tea ceremony as well.
It's a beautiful one.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about peace and calm and tranquility and taking yourself away from the stresses of the day.
Yeah, I'm picturing that in my mind right now. That's lovely.
Yeah, it is. What a lovely note to finish on for today.
Yes, it is. Let's all go have a cup of tea, shall we?
Yeah, we'll leave our listeners with that lovely thought.
Thank you, Martin. I'll talk to you again soon.
And we'll catch you on the next one. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We hope you've enjoyed listening. Please remember, this podcast is designed to give you an insight into therapeutic hypnosis and is for educational purposes only. So remember, consult with your own healthcare professional if you think something you've heard may apply to you or a loved one.
If you found this episode useful, you can apply for free continuing professional development or CME credits using the link provided in the show notes. Feel free to contact either of us through the links in the show notes. Join us again next week.